Danny Meehan and Dr. Mason West.
What's going on, Chicago Bears fans? As you may have noticed, I am not Dr. Mason West. That is not Danny Meehan, but you know what? We're going to have fun with this anyway. I'm Khari Thompson, fairly regular on the show, if you've seen me around. Who we have not seen on the show, at least not us together, is Taylor Dahl. What's going on, Taylor? The first time getting on a show together.
Yeah, I think this is my first time with you and my first time on this show. So I'm excited. A lot of bye week. And it was funny because I did my podcast earlier that will come out tomorrow. And I was like, it's been the first time in a long time that the Bears have been in the bye week with a winning record. So I was just having fun with that. I was just having fun with that this last week.
I mean, wouldn't it be great if we can put away the bye week shenanigans that we're so used to as Chicago Bears fans, where it's like I used to look up the record for Matt Nagy coming out of the bye, and I think he only ever won one game or something like that coming out of the bye. I haven't looked at Matt Eberflus's record out of the bye. Don't know if I want to because there's been a bunch of bad.
They actually won last year coming out of the bye, but they've had 3 straight years of losing records heading into the bye, which is not obviously what you want. So
no, absolutely not. And so let us go ahead and dig in. So it's a little bit of a different week for our chart review. This time around, let's talk a little bit about how we feel about the Bears right now, 4-2, coming out of the bye, about to face the Washington Commanders, which is going to be probably a different kind of contest than the one that we were hoping for reasons we shall discuss in a minute. But how do we feel right now about the Chicago Bears?
Yeah, I feel very optimistic, honestly, about the Bears. And I think that when you look week by week, things that you've wanted to see get better, or changes that you've wanted to see happen have happened. I think that you are, and to your point, we are looking forward to this weekend because it was one of the better, well-rounded offenses, at least through 7 weeks, that we would have seen, maybe outside of CJ Stroud and the Texans. But honestly, they're not playing. He had 86 passing yards last week. So it's not quite the CJ Stroud that we were used to last year. And that was obviously not the best game by the Bears either. But I do think that the last 3 weeks, when you want to talk about the momentum of the offense and kind of seeing things start to click across the entire offense, when it comes to DeAndre Swift, when it comes to Keenan Allen finally getting his game, and Cole Kmet just coming out as being one of these tight ends that everybody's talking about now, and Caleb just getting more and more comfortable. And we're seeing all of these things about his eye discipline and how good that's been, his awareness, his anticipation, his just processing. All of these things are just slowly getting better with Caleb. So I don't really know. And the defense is a whole other story, because that goes now of the streak that they just keep going on, and it's been really fun to watch that. But offensively, some of those concerns in the first few weeks seem like they're subtly being figured out. But I do still think there's some questions, and you want to see it against a good team.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about where the Bears are now, and actually to your point about the way that the offense is going, I saw a stat out there from somebody we know, Jonathan Wood, our guy. He mentioned that 50%, so half of the Chicago Bears drives that have ended in touchdowns or scoring drives, period, I think it was, DeAndre Swift has had a carry of 8 or more yards.
Yeah.
And you're just like,
there it is.
Wow. It's like feed the beast. You know what I mean? And I think that the issue I talked about a lot on this show is that we had a lot of issues with the way that DeAndre Swift was being used in the offense, and the way that his running plays were being blocked. There's a lot of stuff out of shotgun. Obviously, you want to get he's a relatively explosive guy. You want to get him moving and get him on the edge. That wasn't working when he's starting statically, and also the offensive line, I think, was in some major flux. They've since figured some things out. They're moving people now off the line of scrimmage a little bit more, with Matt Pryor being in at right guard. Seems like they found a little bit more stability there. Tevin Jenkins really struggling badly at the beginning of the year, but I think he's starting to round a little bit more into form. And once they started getting under center and having DeAndre Swift hit the line of scrimmage at a sprint, Then you started to see that speed and the ability to make a couple of cuts maybe and get downhill. You started to see that really take effect. And as you've seen that take effect, you've seen the offense be more explosive and just more efficient as a whole. And we talk about it all the time. This is a throwing league now. You got to be able to throw, to score points and be up there with the best offenses in the league. But if you can't run the football, you're not going to be an explosive passing offense. I'm not talking about like not running the football or just like, oh yeah, we can run it if you want to. If you can't run the football, you're not going to be good.
Yeah.
And Chicago Bears running the football better, I think, has directly correlated with how well they've started to play and how good they've been looking on offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. And I said after the Colts game, I made a comment, and that game was crazy anyways. Like having Caleb throw over 50 times was wild. But I think a lot of people were in full panic mode over Shane Waldron and the Bears offense in general, and even Caleb. And I got it to an extent, but on my podcast, I said, I genuinely feel we are figuring out the run game away from this offense exploding, because I think you were seeing way too many good moments and you were seeing Caleb get more comfortable in certain situations. But when your rookie quarterback in his third game in the NFL is throwing the ball 52 times or whatever it ended up being, then you clearly do not have the balance that you want offensively. And so I truly felt that at some point, I didn't know what the direct issues were of why Swift wasn't. We know what type of back Swift was, and I do think they were doing some odd things with him, to your point. But I had a feeling that if that started going, this offense would start clicking. And I do think there was multiple factors into that. So it was the offensive line playing a part. It was Shane Waldron kind of altering the way that he was using DeAndre Swift, getting a Roshan Johnson in there in certain short yardage downs or other situations like that, I think were important. And so I think that run game, I actually have a friend, his name's Daniel Griffiths, but he worked for SI for a long time, analytical data guy. And he's doing an article right now, a long piece that he's in the midst of, that is talking about, this is the highest run like start to a season in over a decade, like that. It's really we've talked a ton about this heavy pass offense and how the offenses are changing so much into the NFL. And like this last year, everyone was like, oh, nobody wants to pay running backs anymore. No one wants to draft a running back in the first round. And then you're seeing it be such an important part of offenses again. And it's not just here in Chicago. If you go through and you look at the top 10 teams in the league, all of them sit in the top of rushing yards, and they have that balance, but they can run the ball efficiently and consistently.
Yes. And I think really when it comes to the Chicago Bears, and you mentioned all the different factors to it, it really just feels like after a couple of weeks of experimenting, and I think honestly, Shane Waldron, I think perhaps just doesn't know what works. We don't know if we can protect that. We don't know if we can run block that. Now it seems like they know.
Yeah.
That like, okay, we can run these plays, we can run them effectively. And Caleb Williams has responded in kind. I believe he has 7 touchdown passes over the last 2 games he's played. Yeah. That'll do. That will play. Now, the real question is, can he push it to 5 this Sunday against the Washington Commanders? So let's get into a little bit of the injury report for this game, the training room roundup. And I'm going to go ahead and read this off because I don't have the graphics ready the way a Mason West would, but you'll get the general gist. So look, let's start with the Washington Commanders because that's the big one that we're going to want to be paying attention to. Jayden Daniels has not practiced yet this week. He was out on Wednesday and Thursday. ESPN's Adam Schefter reported earlier today that the Commanders are going to attempt to try to have Jayden Daniels practice on Friday. That does not sound to me like a guy who is going to suit up this weekend. Then you have Brandon Coleman, offensive tackle, also has not practiced. He has a concussion. And then you've got a bunch of limited participants: Nick Allegretti, guard; Dorrance Armstrong, defensive end; Tyler Biaz, De'Ami Brown, wide receiver; Cleveland Farrell. Actually, Cleveland Farrell, their defensive end, started off this week as a limited participant and ended up not practicing on Thursday. So that's trending in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And then Emmanuel Forbes, their cornerback, he has a thumb injury, but he's been a full participant in practice the past couple of days. It looks like he will play. So obviously the name that sticks out the most there is Jayden Daniels.
Yeah.
Does he play?
Yeah, I actually, as I mentioned, I did my podcast earlier and I had Craig Hoffman. He is one of the hosts for, it's called the radio station in DC called the Team 980. And so he said, and this was early this morning that we actually did this podcast before they even came out and said that Jayden may practice this Friday, blah, blah, blah. And he said similar things. He said, I would not be surprised if he practiced in some capacity on Friday, whether that's a limited or whether it is full, but he did say he highly doubts that they risk this on Sunday just because you do not want to further Jayden Daniels' injury right now at this point. And especially against a defense like the Bears, who he spoke on very highly in this podcast. And he did go on and say that Jayden Daniels, which I didn't know this, he kind of said it as if it was like a thing. So maybe it's something you knew, but Jayden Daniels is big into like the virtual reality stuff. And I guess the Commanders have something to where he's still able to practice, and he has like this virtual reality thing, and he can hear Kingsbury in his ear. He can see the defenses. They have it like set up to where he's looking at the Chicago defense in this virtual reality world, and he can kind of go through progressions and do all of that stuff. The thing you're not actually doing is physically throwing the ball, obviously. So, and that's a big part of the game of football. So we will see. He said that he doesn't think that Jayden wouldn't be prepared on Sunday if he was ready. He's more concerned that the pain tolerance, number one, but number two, just the chances of re-injury with the ribs. We saw it with Justin Fields here of how those ribs can linger. And if it gets re-injured, then sometimes you're missing weeks. And I don't think Washington wants to risk that. So he did say he doubts it, but he did say it will come to terms on Friday.
Yes, and I think that is in the same way that when they were blowing out the Panthers the other day, they weren't going to let Jayden Daniels back into that game, and this is really a long-term play with these young quarterbacks. You don't want to risk the kind of injury that's going to keep guys out long-term if you don't have to, and going to risk valuable reps for them to continue getting better. Now, I will say that the other thing that virtual reality doesn't prepare you for, not just throwing, but it doesn't prepare you to get hit in the ribs.
Hit again, yeah.
Yes, and I think that's probably going to be the bigger thing. Like you mentioned, the pain tolerance. I don't expect him to play. Dr. Mason West, the normal host of the show, is another guy who said, look, I think this is a multi-week injury, particularly if you're talking about, some of like a potential sprain or something like that inside like the intercostal muscles. I mean, I've done that before. That's not fun. You don't want to have to get hit in the, like, even if you wear a flak jacket or anything like that, it's just not comfortable. And there's a point to which you're worried about effectiveness with throwing the football. And again, taking hits. You're probably not going to want to run Jayden Daniels as much in that scenario. And
it takes away a lot of his game. Yeah.
Yes, it's a huge part of his game. And so if you're limiting what Jayden Daniels can do, is it best to just let him be? So then that would put the spotlight pretty firmly on Marcus Mariota. Got to say, not terribly worried about what Marcus Mariota can do to you, but still a guy who's got athleticism, who can hurt you with his legs, et cetera, et cetera. Let's slide on over the Bear side of things really quickly with the injury report. Two guys looking not likely to play at this particular point, but we shall see. Safety Jaquan Brisker, who is in concussion protocol, has been for a bit now. He did not practice on Wednesday or Thursday. Neither did Kyler Gordon, who has a hamstring injury. And then you have actually a pretty clean bill of health the rest of the way. Mercedes Lewis didn't practice.
That's his rest
Thursday,
day.
But that's a veteran rest day. Like, you're not worried about that. Just for if somebody looks at it, right? And it's like, oh, you didn't mention Mercedes Lewis didn't practice. It's like, he does one of those every single week. He's like, he's 40. So like, okay, you live with that. But the rest of the guys, so Tyreek Stevenson, limited participant with a calf injury. And then everybody else that was on the injury report: Larry Borum, Travis Homer, Zach Pickens, Terrell Smith, Scott Daly, Jacob Martin, all full participants on Thursday, probably trending that way tomorrow as well. So relatively clean bill of health. Don't love two of the best players on your defense potentially being out, though.
Yeah, I think that Brisker to me is a big one. The podcast that I did with Craig earlier, he specifically mentioned Brisker and how important he thinks he would be in this game, just because of some of the things that Cliff Kingsbury calls, and some of especially their shift of what they will probably have to do with Marcus Mariota. He thinks Brisker would just be a big factor in this defense. I will say I was pretty impressed with Elijah Hicks, and I know as the Jags, and the Jags offense has not been awesome this year so far, but you're not covering scrubs out there. Like, it's a Brian Thomas Jr. and Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram and some of those guys that you were still able to hold down. And I think that Kevin Byard just having the season that he's had so far, and the veteran presence and him, really did help Elijah Hicks. I think that Kyler Gordon, you just want on the football field. He's just so good when it comes to everything, when it comes to blitzing the quarterback, you see him everywhere. And I do think it is important to have Kyler. So it's not ideal to not have these guys. But I do think that the Bears secondary is good enough, especially if it's Mariota. I think, honestly, I'd be more concerned up front. I think they're going to run the heck out of the ball. Brian Robinson's been really good. You talked about Mariota's verse when it comes to him being mobile. And I do think they'd rely on that more heavily. So to me, it almost, you want to just focus up there and stop the run and force Marcus Mariota to test some of those guys in the secondary, honestly.
Yeah, I think in the same way that you would challenge it, and I mean, look, I've seen it a bunch over here in New England, so I'm based out of there. Those first couple of weeks when teams were like, yeah, we're just going to crowd the line of scrimmage and make Jacoby Brissett throw the football. Yeah, I would do that to Marcus Mariota. Make him throw the football, because we know he can run. We know he can affect the game with his legs. We know he's a danger scrambling outside of the pocket and potentially getting loose there. Keep everything inside and make him beat you down the field, make him read things out. It's just unfortunate because you got Brisker and Gordon, who have been, honestly, like two of my favorite players on the Bears this year. I mean, Gordon's been an absolute demon.
He's just so fun.
He is. He
brings so much energy. Like every single play, every snap he's out there, you feel like Kyler's involved in the play in some way.
Yes. And listen, in the comments section, true, you never want to underestimate the backups. I just want to say we just know who Marcus Mariota is at this point in his career. He's a backup quarterback. But look, you got to take care of business. You can't take it lightly. You got to do what you got to do against Senor Mariota. Now, let us take a quick break and talk about Kombucha, one of our sponsors for this show. Kombucha is a premium performance-based kombucha crafted specifically for athletes and active individuals. This revitalizing beverage blends the traditional benefits of kombucha with nutritional enhancements to support energy, hydration, and recovery. Made from organic teas and infused with natural electrolytes, Kombucha offers a delicious and effective solution to maintain peak performance. Better athletic performance, increased nutrient absorption, improved wellness, and improved cognitive stamina. Honestly, I kind of want to try that now. Gotta say. Have you ever had anything like? I mean, I don't really drink kombucha. I don't know if you get that.
I honestly haven't, but I do have a friend actually who is like obsessed with this stuff. To be honest, like
kombucha.
It's like his fridge is packed with it every time. Oh, sorry.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, every time we read this out, I'm like, I gotta give that a try. Maybe it'll help me shave, a 0.01 or whatever off my 40 or something like that.
I did want to share really quick. This is off topic, but when we were just talking about Brisker, because I had asked Mason earlier, actually, because Brisker, obviously, it's a concussion. And it's always so fascinating to me to see concussions and how differently they're handled. First of all, we've seen that in the NFL from a Tua concussion to other concussions. I do feel like the Bears have been more cautious because last year, I want to say it was Brisker last year who had the concussion. I'm trying to remember. It was someone late who had a concussion and missed like a few weeks. And I remember it being kind of odd because I was like, you'll see other guys who will get a concussion Sunday and then they're practicing Wednesday, Thursday. So I had just asked Mason earlier and he just replied, that's what it made me think of it. But about Brisker's, like, what is the difference? Why is Brisker now on 3 weeks and he's still where he's still dealing with a concussion and other guys are back in a couple days. And he pretty much was just going through. He said it's all about symptoms, just like a muscle strain. There are varying degrees of damage during a concussion, and just like the muscle injuries, people heal at different rates. So things like headaches, light sensitivity, dizziness, etc., arrive. They're still there for him apparently, and so it kind of sucks. And it's just like one of those things where it's like, man, like, come on, Brisk, we want you out there.
Absolutely. Now we are going to get into the parts of the show where our guy, Dr. Mason West, likes to come up with fun sections that, look, I don't have the descriptors for those, but the general gist of this section, the knee-jerk reaction, is give me something that you've seen with the Chicago Bears recently, like a hot take that comes to mind about this particular matchup that's coming up against the Washington Commanders. Something that you expect to see.
Oh, that's a good one. So something that I expect to see, so I want to say that I've been waiting for this for weeks. And if you listen to any of Making Monsters, I'm just like the biggest Rome Odunze fan in the entire world. And I'm just waiting for that like official breakout. And I think a game like this would be perfect for Rome to do so. And I know we saw DJ Moore last year and go off against the Washington Commanders, and Commanders fans are completely traumatized by that at this point. But I just want to see, we've seen the 112-yard game with the touchdown, but I feel like when you look at some of the other rookie wide receivers numbers, Brian Thomas Jr., for example, granted, he's being used more as a 1 or 2 wide receiver, so it is a little different circumstance, but I would love to see Rome more involved in this. I feel like he's open all the time. He separates so well. He led the college football in contested catches last year. So like throw it up, let him get some of those deep balls, because it is something that we haven't really seen from the Bears. I haven't been mad at it.
Yeah.
I haven't been mad that they've kind of worked on perfecting those midfield, intermediate. I've liked it. I think that's one of the things people were concerned about from Caleb. So seeing Caleb be really good at those things, I'm excited. But I also want to see those deep shots. And I think Rome's the perfect person, and it's the perfect game to be able to do that.
And you know what? I think, and I haven't looked at the man coverage rates for the Washington Commanders, but last year that was really the big thing, where they played a ton of man coverage. And that was part of what allowed DJ Moore and well, it was largely DJ Moore. I think it was like 200 and
it was a lot,
something like that of Justin Fields, or 230 receiving yards that day. And like they all went to DJ Moore pretty much, with a Cole Kmet sprinkled in there, etc. But I think if they do that again, which I don't know if that's necessarily the recipe for success, because all three of those top line receivers, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Keenan Allen, bake man coverage.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's necessarily the thing that you want to do, but if they do try to get aggressive and try to heat Caleb Williams up, that is absolutely what I would do. I would throw, I would look, Rome is the fastest guy in that receiving room.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you trust him to get downfield, you want to get him open on a crosser and let him run after the catch. I think that's the thing that excites me the most, is the idea of Rome getting the ball in space and catching and running and turning something into big yak. I would actually love to see them hand him the ball once or twice, because he's fast. Like,
I know, he's so quick.
I feel like people, you might look at his 40 time, right? He ran in the 4.4 or something like that, but he's got track speed. He's got long speed. So you see him separate from guys the longer the play goes on, because he can really run. He can open up a gap as time goes on. I want to see that kind of thing. Get him the ball in some space, let him run, because I think there's a non-zero chance that if you get him involved by the end of the year, I think Keenan Allen has obviously started to come on. He had 2 touchdown catches a couple of weeks ago, but this is the kind of guy who can develop quickly into a wide receiver 2, given more opportunities.
Yeah.
I'm eagerly awaiting it as well. So hopefully this is the week that it happens.
I did just look. So they run about a little over 30% man coverage, actually, to 19% in Chicago.
All right. Well, you know what? Play as much man coverage as you want, Washington. Let's
go.
I think on my side of things, I think this could well be, your first like huge, like 100-yard DeAndre Swift game. I think this is going to be the one where obviously he's been trending upward in the right direction this entire time. I think they're going to give him plenty of opportunities to burn clock and get explosive plays off of this defense. And they're going to be missing Jonathan Allen, their big time defensive tackle. That's going to help from that perspective. So I'm looking for him to go off and create easier opportunities for Caleb Williams and co. once they get in the red zone to rack up some more touchdown passes.
Yeah, they have their rookie Johnny Newton's been the one that like he's replacing Jonathan Allen, and I know they've liked what they've seen out of Johnny Newton, but I mean Jonathan Allen, that going to a rookie, obviously you do want to be able to take advantage of that interior.
Absolutely. And, Johnny Newton was a guy that I mean, we know well out here in these parts. He was with the Illinois Illini. I liked him as if you trade into the, back half or whatever in the first round, that could be a guy that maybe they would be interested in. Obviously, he suffered a foot injury that kind of knocked his draft stock down a couple of pegs. But I was looking at him as a guy who could potentially fit here in Chicago. We'll see what he looks like against Washington. Could have a glimpse of what could have been. Not that I'm sad that they ended up with. I'm not sad that they ended up with Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. I am 100% good with that. But it'll be interesting to see him up close. Now, let us take another quick break and read this absurdly long but awesome ad read from our sponsors at Underdog.
All right, so Underdog Fantasy is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports, which I think sounds good to most people. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. Compete against other players just by selecting higher or lower on 2 or more players' stats. You could win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog. So one of the things that I've been looking at on this is a new feature they have. It's called the Red Zone Rush. It's a game that you will not find anywhere else. You just pick whether or not a player will score a touchdown by swiping right for yes and left for no. Simple as that. That's literally all you've got to do. And plus your entry will be automatically boosted and you'll get a 51% profit boost when you play Red Zone Rush. They also have a cool feature too where Underdog puts the power to cash out in your hands. Now you can either keep riding with your entry or you can tap the win now button and you can cash out whenever you want. So I think that's pretty cool. And they also have a ton of promos. It's currently Boostober on Underdog, where there's a different promo that you can play almost every single day this month. So that's super fun too. I also want to remind people to use the promo code CITY. It's CITY. And some of the numbers that I think you can look at this week when we were just talking about the DJ Moore game last year, I think that could be a fun one if you want to go higher or lower on Underdog. They have him right now at just 57.5 receiving yards. I feel like most people may click higher on that, but if you want to go the Rome Odunze route that we were talking about a second ago, they have just 2.5 receptions, higher or lower. You can go for Rome Odunze on that one. So I think there's a couple different ways you can go with that. So just a reminder, download the app today and use code CITY, CITY, to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. And also with that higher or lower, if you select the higher or lower on your favorite players, you can win cash right away on Underdog. As I mentioned earlier, you can cash out now if you want, but you must be 18 or up. 19 and up in Alabama and New England, 19 and up in Colorado for some games, 21 and up in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply, void in Colorado. And if you are concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. If you're in Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. And if you're in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8 Hope NY or text Hope NY to 467-369.
That was a dominant performance right there by our own Taylor Dahl, host of Making Monsters. Seriously, I mean, go ahead, give yourself.
That was a lot of words.
Yes. But look, as somebody.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, as somebody who started using the Underdog app, since being on this show, since they've generously sponsored Second City Gridiron, I actually love being able to, like post up to like 6 different bets, and you still win a little bit even if you don't hit them all, which is like one of those things that like, it's so sad about some of the other ones.
Yeah. And I usually go offense because it's easier, but they do obviously have the defensive one where right now, literally, it's just a half of interception for Jaylen. So if Jaylen gets an interception and you click higher, you win money. It's like, that's okay, go for it.
Bam. Okay. Like and see, yeah, you're right. Defense, I tend to generally stay away from, but they also tend to be like rewarding if you get it right. So now let's get into a little bit of what you need to know. I found a couple of interesting numbers to discuss. One of them is on the Chicago Bears side with our favorite rookie quarterback, Caleb Williams, talking about how his advanced numbers have started to look better. I mean, even on, some of the like, EPA per play stuff was really rough earlier in the season. And that's the thing. You get penalized for bad games pretty hard, but he's really starting to creep his way up there into the good half of quarterbacks in the league. You love to see it. And per Next Gen Stats, Williams has a strong average intended air yards of 7.7, which is 14th in the league. So he's not being overly cautious. He's not a check down merchant. He is running the offense. He's creating big plays, but he also is not being reckless with it. So again, according to Next Gen Stats, aggressiveness ratio, which measures the percent of times a quarterback throws into coverage with a defender within a yard or less, he has the 6th lowest percentage in the league at 10.6%. In that area is Patrick Mahomes, who leads the league at 7%. Lamar Jackson is second at 8.1%. Trevor Lawrence is 10.4%. And Jared Goff is right below Williams at 10.9%. So you get the idea. He's making good decisions. He's not putting the ball into harm's way. Obviously, he had a couple of interceptions a few weeks ago that were a bit tough, where it wasn't necessarily a bad decision. He was just a little bit late with the ball. But he's done a great job over the past couple of weeks finding open guys and letting them do his thing. What does that give you? What does that tell you about the way Caleb Williams is playing based on what you've seen?
Yeah, I think something we've heard a lot about Caleb, and that just kind of confirms it, is his football knowledge and just how smart he is when it comes to making these plays. And I think that when you go through and you look at some of those interceptions, the Jags one, for example, I just did another podcast with Tim Jenkins. He broke down Caleb's film. And in that one, he said he felt like that ball slipped out of his hands. He said going back and watching it, it just looked like it just didn't come out of his hands the right way. And that's why it didn't fully go probably the length of the field he wanted it to go. There were some bad ones though. When you look at it was back-to-back weeks with 2 picks in those back-to-back weeks. But I do think that one thing you can talk about, number one, is it doesn't phase him almost, which is good. You want that, okay, I made a mistake, let me get back out there and go. He doesn't look like he's nervous, which is a good thing. But I do think it just confirms about how good Caleb is when it comes to being able to read defenses and being able to manipulate the defenses and being able to do things with his eyes. And I use that Tim Jenkins used the words eye discipline a lot. And he said Caleb's one of the best quarterbacks in the league at that, and already in his short pro career. And that is such a good thing, because that also is going to eliminate some of those mistakes. That's why, amongst other things, and I know we hate this name on here, but it's a guy he compares himself to, and Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers, he was so good at so many things, but he was really good at just like the knowledge of football and being able to trick defenses with his eyes and trick defenses with different things. So you didn't see a lot of turnovers from Aaron because of his decision making and because of him being able to kind of make defenses do whatever he wanted them to do. And I think we're already seeing that from Caleb. So it's been really fun. It's not like, I think we'll still see some mistakes, because I still think there's learning things happening. And the more they open up this offense to be Caleb's offense, the more we will see some moments. But it has been fun to see the mistakes and the accuracy get better and better each week.
Absolutely. I think, and this is something I talked about with a couple of people, in our chat room circles that we have with the Chicago Bears. But there were really people after those first couple of weeks that I think wanted to see Caleb Williams play poorly. And we're immediately just like, well, Chicago Bears made a mistake. They're cursed. It's doomed, et cetera, et cetera. Without, I think, looking at the games themselves and seeing like, okay, look, yeah, there are mistakes and there are some things that he needs to work on. But by and large, this is decent quarterback play. It's some of the luck is bad. And there are certain things where it's like, okay, Caleb, don't try to throw all the way to the left while rolling out to your right on the run. That works in college. That does not work in the NFL. Don't do that. There are also a couple of times where it's like, okay, I know you are incredible at extending the play. Please stop holding the ball out here. Something bad will happen. Also, you can stay in this pocket. You don't have to leave it. Those are all things that he's going to learn. But I feel like you're not as concerned. And I feel like I never was concerned about whether or not he has the mental acuity to play the position or whether or not he has the arm talent to play the position in a way that I think I have been concerned in varying degrees with past, young quarterback the Chicago Bears have had. And so I think, yes, it's not going to be a completely ascending trajectory the entire time, but as long as it moves up. And as long as it is up from where you started this year, I think you feel pretty good about that. And he's showing signs of being able to make that happen. On the other side of things, the Washington Commanders, since we don't know about what Jayden Daniels is going to, if he's going to be able to play this weekend, obviously I'm guessing no, and there's a bunch of doubt about it. I wanted to look really quickly at where they rank in certain key statistics. And one I like to look at is DVOA. Offensively, Washington ranks third in the league in DVOA. They are one of the most explosive offenses in the league. Jayden Daniels has been one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league. I believe he probably still leads the league in EPA and completion percentage over expected combined into the one statistic. On the other hand, though, Washington's defense, not very good. They currently rank 23rd in DVOA. That is a huge disparity between those teams or between those sides of the ball. So I would look at it as without Jayden Daniels, the Commanders are probably going to struggle a good amount. And generally, that's going to lead to some compounding problems on the other side of the ball where they're not as good. Is that kind of your read?
Yeah, I think that, and that even give more props to Jayden, because I feel like a lot of times when you're looking at especially young quarterbacks, when like the defenses help a ton and his defense has not helped him a ton, and he's still kind of doing what he's doing offensively. So props to him. But when you go back and you look at the teams they've played so far, and so their defense has had to go up against the Bucks. They've had to go up against the Bengals. They've had to go up against the Ravens. So there's been some tests in there for the defenses. But then also they've had teams like the Giants and the Browns and the Panthers, who obviously offensively haven't been so strong. And so I think that's when sometimes you do have to go look at that when you're looking at each side. But I do think it is a testament to where their strengths are. And when you're losing your quarterback, which we saw Marcus Mariota come in last week when Jayden went down and things looked okay, but it was the Panthers, and we saw here what the firsthand how bad the Panthers are. So I think you do have to take it for a grain of salt. I do think the Bears defense gives Mariota a much bigger task than what he had against Carolina, obviously. So I do think that, as I mentioned earlier, the run game is going to be a big part of it. And so in the same light, their defense, and when I was talking earlier on my podcast, he said, I don't think we have somebody who can cover DJ Moore. Said it outright. There is not a person on this team that I think can match up with DJ Moore.
Didn't have him last year either.
Yeah. And so he mentioned that, and he was like, oh, and by the way, we couldn't stop DJ Moore last year. And now you have Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze and Cole Kmet's having a great year, and you could throw DeAndre Swift into the pass game, obviously. And so there's all these other factors too now that they don't only have to worry about DJ. You have a whole other slew of weapons that you have to focus on. So I do think their defense right now is probably just trying to hope that they can force Caleb to make some mistakes and hope they can score enough, because I truly don't think that they believe they can stop the Bears offense at this moment.
I don't have any faith in them either. I will say on the other side of the ball, so they're unfortunately one of the worst pass defenses in the league. They are 28th in passing touchdowns allowed. They've given up 12 passing touchdowns already. They don't intercept the ball very much, which is kind of why you drafted Emmanuel Forbes.
Yeah.
But that hasn't really been happening. On the other side of things, though, the Chicago Bears are not perhaps as good or as dominant against the run as we would like all the time. They don't allow that many rushing yards. They're 11th in the league in rushing yards allowed, but yards per attempt, they're 20th, and they're kind of dead center in terms of rushing touchdowns allowed. Where they're really great is against the pass. They absolutely dominate and destroy and throttle opposing defenses when it comes to the pass. And now that's not just about the guys on the back end, but it's also about one guy who was a Commander last year, who is now currently a Bear. That is Montez Sweat. So we're going to get into that one a little bit later. I kind of want to sneak that in potentially to these next few sections. Real quick, I got to ask: are you familiar with Love It, Hate It, or Rehabilitate It? Do you know this game?
I do not.
All right. So this is looking at the matchup, whether it's numbers, statistics, something you're feeling about it, that you either love, hate, or want to rehabilitate. For example, let me go first. Something that I love from this matchup for the Chicago Bears, obviously, is the passing game versus the Commanders' pass defense. I think that this is a perfect. Obviously, they're going to want to run the ball, going to want to establish that. But I think the Bears have a good chance. They're going to get anything they want out of the Commanders' pass defense. I don't think they have anybody that can cover DJ Moore, as you said. And if you want to go ahead and you want to double DJ Moore, you want to give him some extra attention, then there's Keenan Allen. You're going to hit him. You're going to be able to find Cole Kmet against zone. And please give us some Rome Odunze highlights from this game. So I love the matchup of the Bears passing offense versus the passing defense for the Commanders.
Yeah. So do I say a love or I just say one of those?
Go ahead and give me a love. What are you loving from this?
Okay. I'll say in the opposite light, because I think that when you're talking about you love the defense against the Washington weapons, I'm going to reverse that. And I'm going to say that I love the Bears, because you just said, sorry, now I'm confusing myself now, because you just said you love the Bears defense going against Washington weapons. I
said the opposite.
Opposite. So that's what I'm going to say then,
yeah.
the reverse, because I think that, yes, Terry McLaurin, I think that the Terry McLaurin Jaylen battle could be fun. Somebody said that in the comments. We will see exactly how they kind of do all of that. But aside from that, I don't know. There's some guys that I think Cliff Kingsbury's been able to make serviceable when it comes to a Luke McCaffrey. Obviously Zach Ertz he has his moments, he's kind of on the tail end of things. So I just think that you can take advantage of Noah Brown. You can take advantage of Zach Ertz. You can take advantage of some of those other guys. So I feel like if you put Jaylen on Terry and just let only have to make him force the ball to some other people, especially if you can manage to stop the run, then Bears are winning that battle.
Yes. Again, I think this is like one of those rare occasions where I think last year when they were coming into this, where it was week 6, I want to say.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because they were 1-4 and they came out of that game 2-4, right? That
sounds happened? Right. I think it was week 6.
Yeah. And so they come into that game, and I think we were a bit, I don't know, we were wondering what that was going to look like. We weren't 100% assured that the Bears were the better team or the more talented team. And I think we were wondering, like, okay, this Justin Fields thing, like, is this it or not? I feel like this year we know that, especially this iteration of the command, even if they had Jayden Daniels, you're still looking at the Bears like they're the more talented team and they should win this game for sure. In the same way that Jayden Daniels played well, played solidly against the Baltimore Ravens, but the Ravens were just better. Yeah. I don't know that the Bears are on the Ravens level yet, but that's kind of the idea that I'm getting. It's that the Bears are definitely better. They should win this game. Now, in terms of something that I hate, I don't know that there's necessarily something that I patently hate matchup wise for this game. So you know what? I'm just gonna go ahead and lay this one out there in a slightly different direction. I hate that Jayden Daniels is probably not going to play.
I know. I was gonna go that too. I agree with you.
I mean, it's just we built it up, right? We were so ready for it. This is going to be an excellent duel, and now I'm over here looking at it like, oh my God, like, we better get that Drake May. We better get that Drake May Caleb duel. That's got to happen, because if we get robbed of that, that's going to hurt.
Oh my
gosh. But they flexed the game. It's a 4:25 Eastern time, because we're both on the East Coast.
Yep.
And now we're going to lose it, and we're going to get Caleb Williams versus Marcus Mariota.
You're like, no. I know.
Like Marcus Mariota, like 5 years ago, might have been more interesting, but even then, not as exciting.
Yeah, I'm bummed because obviously the matchup, but I'm also bummed because I was excited for both sides to kind of be tested. I was excited to see Jayden Daniels against a good defense, and I was excited to see this defense against a quarterback who's been playing really, really well. And so, because when you go, I mentioned earlier, outside of CJ Stroud, I feel like there's been a bunch of offenses that haven't really been playing well. And so I was excited to see this bigger test for them. And so I'm bummed with that. I think that, and even if he ends up playing for whatever reason, let's say Friday he practices and they're like, oh, he's good to go. There's always going to be kind of this thing in the back of the head, especially if the Bears just end up crushing them. They're going to be like, oh, well, Jayden was hurt. Like his ribs were sore and whatever. So that's just going to be the storyline of this game. We saw the stat the other day, though, or like the graphic that said if the season were to end today, all 4 NFC North teams would be in, and the Bears would be facing Washington in the playoffs. So that could be an interesting thing to maybe look forward to later. Foreshadowing some stuff. But yeah, I agree. I hate that. I think another thing that I hate is and you mentioned it briefly, but our defensive line against their run game. I just think that Brian Robinson's been really good. The way they use Austin Eckler too, I think people forget. So we have Austin Eckler, Gerald Everett, and Keenan Allen all in this game, like all the Chargers weapons. But I think that I don't love it. And they just have not been good at stopping the run. When you look at both Javon Dexter, Andrew Billings, Montez Sweat, Darrell Taylor, all of them sit in their categories when it comes to defensive tackles and defensive ends at the top of the pass rush win rate, but none of them sit anywhere in the top 20 when it comes to the run blocking. So that concerns me a little bit, because that is their strength. And then you add Mariota, who probably that's what they're going to ask him to do, is just run the ball and try and make the Bears start focusing so much on that, where you can get it out every now and then. When I did the podcast earlier, he said that every game this year, they've had like 120+ yard run from one of their backs, and Cliff Kingsbury has been able to scheme up these huge explosive runs where they've done it 3-4 times a game. Like that's a lot to watch and a lot to handle for, to me, a defensive line that just hasn't been able to do that. Especially, I feel like once they get to the red zone, it changes. It's like something turns on, they hit the red zone, and all of a sudden they can like run block a little better. But driving down the field, it concerns me.
Yes. And so I think, again, the Commanders are going to have to do this, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not going to be able to pass the ball as effectively, or at least we don't expect that they will. So it is going to be a test for the Chicago Bears defense to show that they can stop the barrage over and over again, whether it's Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, or read options with Marcus Mariota, design quarterback runs. You got to get after it. Rehabilitate it. We mentioned this already, but I want to throw a couple of stats out here. Rome Odunze so far this year, aside from one game where he went off for 112 yards, where he caught 6 of 11 targets, he has been targeted in the first game 5 times. The week after that Indy game against the Rams, 3 times. Against the Panthers, 6 times. And against the Jaguars, only twice. So I want to see Rome Odunze get more involved in this. Because I think that he's more than just a decoy, and he's more than just a wide receiver 3 to DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. I believe that he could be a key to really unlocking the explosive potential of this offense. I want to see him get more chances down the middle of the field. I want to see him get schemed touches. I mean, run the ball with him if you can. I remember they did that in like preseason. I was like, yes, do that some more. I mean, not all the time. We don't want to give him like 3 carries a game or anything like that, turn him into a running back, but get him the ball in space. He's an important piece of this offense.
Yeah, I think that I don't know if I'm going the right way with this, but I'm going to start with the offensive line. I think that Tevin Jenkins, and I kind of joked about it on Twitter where I said every year, like, Tevin's gotten injured. And then when he's come back from injury, he's been like this superhero. And so I feel like we're already seeing that from Tevin. Obviously, his return since he left the game injured has been like old Tevin that you've been wanting to see. But I think when you're looking across the line as a whole and Tevin's playing at a very high level. Coleman Shelton, honestly, has been playing really good. You're seeing a lot of good things out of him. And then I think that you mentioned earlier when it comes to Matt Pryor playing in place of Nate Davis, I think that those things, and you never want to see injury, but I almost feel like certain injuries have helped this offensive line. So I feel like the more they start to play together and the more they mesh, we talked about the cohesiveness being so important on the offensive line. I think that now getting 2-3 games, and I think this is the perfect stretch to do this when it comes to Washington, when it comes to the Patriots, and when it comes to the Cardinals, the perfect 3-game stretch to get these 5 guys all on the same page for when you have to kind of face that gauntlet towards the end of the season.
Indeed. Now, let us move on to the game itself. Who do you think will be the X factor for the Washington Commanders this week?
I'm going to say Brian Robinson. I mentioned how important their run game is a lot already, but I just truly think it is. I think that if he gets going and you see some of the explosiveness you've seen from him this season, and I don't think they're going to fully trust Mariota to do a lot of things. So the ball's going to be in Brian Robinson's hands a ton. You don't want to see these long drives where they're taking 7, 8, 9 minutes out of the clock and wearing down the Bears defense with the run game. So I do think that he is, to me, the most important part of if Washington has a chance.
I think that kind of in a similar mode there, I think also sticking with offense, it might be the tight ends. So like Zach Ertz, because I think that with quarterbacks, that especially game managing quarterbacks and backups, they tend to like throwing to the tight ends a little bit more than throwing the ball deep down the field, unless like that's the kind of quarterback that you are. I feel like Mariota is going to be the kind of guy who's going to want to keep it short, don't make mistakes. He's going to run the ball, obviously. But the guys who tend to get the most burn off of those kinds of passers are the tight ends. Zach Ertz is nothing like what he used to be when he was with the Philadelphia Eagles. But if he can obviously just be competent and catch the football, he might be their leading receiver this weekend, I think.
Yeah, and Zach Ertz is, I think, a safety blanket. To your point, I think tight ends, especially veteran tight ends, a lot of times for offenses are, and I do think that's a big thing. You just saw Ben Sinnott get his first touchdown last week, too, with Marcus Mariota, so that I think the tight ends are a good point, too.
All right. Now, on the Chicago Bears side of things, we were talking a little bit about the defensive line. I think this would be a great time for our guy, Gervon Dexter Sr., to show up, especially against the run. Now, he is markedly better as a run defender than he was last year. Pro Football Focus had him graded at 36.2 as a run defender. This year it's up to 57.2. So that is a 20-point difference. That is significant improvement. Not great, but it's still improvement. I think that particularly for a defensive interior that I think really needs him, I think, to be that guy. That's what he's here for, is to be, kind of an attention-grabbing 3 technique. Andrew Billings is a good player, but again, I think that even Andrew Billings, he's stout, but I think his best utility is even as a pass rusher so far. He's much higher. He's a much higher graded pass rusher than you would think for a guy like a nose tackle, one technique kind of guy. But I think where it really comes down to it is you've got to be a force against the run. I'm looking for Dexter to do that, show that you are unblockable. You can get into the backfield, cause some problems, and let your linebackers come over the top and make some plays.
Yeah, I think that is a very important part when it comes to the defensive side, and I think we could point to Andrew Billings too. But I'm gonna go with the obvious one. I feel like, but I'm gonna say Caleb Williams. I think that this is a game where it's not a very good defense, but it's a team who really wants to beat Chicago, and a offensive coordinator who is familiar with Caleb as he was with him at USC last season. And it's Caleb's return to Washington, his hometown of the DMV, and all of these other factors that kind of go in. And even if Jayden's not there, it's still Caleb versus Jayden's Washington Commanders. And so I think that Caleb Williams just kind of doing what honestly he's done the last 3 weeks, but especially this last 2 weeks, and getting to the ball to an assortment of weapons and just playing smart football and not making a bunch of mistakes, and kind of make everyone after this game, especially a 425 game that was flexed for the reason of Caleb and Jayden, just showing people like this is why people wanted me to play at this prime time, I guess you could say.
That's right. It's like this is my city. Get about you. You know what I mean? All right. Now, gut check time. What's your prediction for the game?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm so bad at predictions. I think the Bears win. I think that if Jayden plays, it looks different. I think that if Jayden plays, it is more of a, I don't want to say super high scoring game, because I do think that the Bears defense is good enough, but I don't know. This is honestly hard. I keep going back and forth. I'm going to say, I think the Bears score like 34 on Washington, and I think Washington maybe like 34-17.
Okay, we're gonna give them 17 points. All right.
Yeah, and that's
I mean, well, I mean, like you said, if they're able to run the football and control it, I think that's going to be the main thing.
It just scares me what the Colts did to us in the run game. Like it terrifies me.
Yeah, and you know what? As you mentioned it, right? It's like Anthony Richardson is having a really awful year, but they hit one or two big plays in the pass game, and then they were able to run the football.
Yeah.
And so I think that is absolutely something worth noting. Now, I think it'll probably be more like I'm going to go with 30-13, because I think that ultimately I don't know that Marcus Mariota has that ability to hit it down the field. Obviously, Terry McLaurin is something you always got to make sure that you got him locked up. I'm sure they'll take a shot or two, even if Jalen Johnson is on him. And especially if, and again, this is the thing, right? You know, we're assuming Jaquan Brisker's probably not going to be in this game because he's been in concussion protocol. So if you want to test the safeties, obviously Kevin Byard's still going to be back there. But, you know, if you want to test a backup safety, we'll see if they hit something. And that could be a thing that turns the game on its head. I'm still going to say I don't believe in Marcus Mariota. And I think that making him throw the football is going to make this difficult. They'll probably get a score and then get a couple of field goals. And then the Chicago Bears will walk out of this one with a victory, hopefully a very convincing one. That, I believe, is the end of the show.
Oh, we did it.
We did. Look at us filling in admirably. You know, like, listen, you know, we got our guys, you know, on the injury report, you know, but out for personal reasons. But you know what? We held it down. Hopefully the Chicago Bears will hold it down this weekend. I am Khari Thompson, and that is Taylor Dahl, host of Making Monsters with the Windy City Grind. This has been Bare Bones. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.